Buffalo After Dark is proud to recommend I Barbecue for You. Pre-orders are suggested by calling 716-880-7667. I Barbecue for You, Buffalo's new barbecue destination.
Just move the Coyotes. Don't do another expansion.
Right? It would never crossed my mind. So somebody called the house when I was out mowing the grass.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
Yes, sir.
Holy shit, your face is like purple.
Are you still up? Now in your fifth season, it's Buffalo After Dark.
Welcome to Buffalo After Dark, everybody. It is actually Tuesday night, May 13th, as we're recording this. Of course, I'm Tom. I'm here on my own. Bobby's in the middle of the ocean, somewhere on a cruise with his wife for his anniversary. So we're here on our own tonight, which is all right, but we still have some good sports news we want to talk about. And of course, if you want to see some of our previous episodes, feel free to go to YouTube or Spotify. And at the time of this recording, which is basically 10:37 at night Eastern time, we'll talk a little bit about some of the latest news that's going on. And of course, we'll have this episode up on our YouTube and Spotify probably sometime later tonight or tomorrow, depending on how things go. But with that being said, we'll jump right into some of the latest sports news, and we're going to talk a little bit about hockey first. There's definitely been continued action with the playoffs, and of course, we also do have some other notable injuries that have been coming up and some other stories as well. So, of course, right now, with the way things are situated in the Stanley Cup playoffs, Dallas is leading Winnipeg in the series. Florida is right now, actually, when they played on the 11th, they're tied at 2. And of course, with everything else going on, Florida and Toronto will play tomorrow night, which is going to be the 14th. But right now, Washington and Carolina, I wouldn't have thought that Carolina was going to be up 3-1 in the series, but they are. They ended up getting a win against the Caps 5-2 the other night. And then Vegas and Edmonton, that's a surprising series too, because I would have thought that Vegas would have showed up and done a lot more, but they're actually down 3-1 in this series when they ended up getting when Edmonton actually got the 3-0 shutout last night. So it's definitely interesting to see what's been happening with everything. And of course, if everything stands the way it does right now, Dallas is going to go up in the series against Winnipeg. They're actually leading at 3-1 with about 2:51 left in Game 4. So it'll be very interesting to watch, but I would have thought Edmonton's goaltending being a little suspect, they're still overpowering Vegas. So definitely interesting to see what's going on there. But that being said, there's a few notes that are in the league right now. And one of the biggest things, especially as we go into tomorrow night with Florida and Toronto, Matthews has had a scoring drought, and he has done next to nothing in the playoffs. And essentially with what we're looking at, he hasn't scored goals in the last 9 Stanley Cup playoff games against Florida Panthers, and he has actually a total of only 3 goals in his past 18 postseason games that he's been a part of. So it's something where I'm kind of surprised that he hasn't been just coming out and laying it on the line. But then again, a lot of times in the playoffs, he's going to be one of the people that the opposition is just going to shut down. And really, the interesting fact of this series with the Panthers is that really one of the only players that has actually scored 3 times against the Panthers in this series is William Nylander. So it's very interesting to see that there hasn't been a lot of consistent scoring. But that being said, he's basically the last time that they ended up playing Florida in the second round back in 2023, Matthews was held to 2 assists. And right now he has 3 assists through 4 games in this series, and this is when he's scored at least 40 goals in the last 6 of his 9 seasons. So it's interesting in the fact that Florida found a way to shut him down. And a lot of teams have been finding ways to shut him down in the playoffs. So it's just a very interesting note that's been coming up. Right now, in terms of the Maple Leafs themselves, Austin Matthews is second all time. He scored 401 regular season goals, which is just 19 behind Matt Sundin. And he's tied for fifth in the postseason overall with 25. So, that being said, it's basically he's not scoring, but he's working in other areas of the game. So, sometimes when you're not hitting the net, if you can check, if you can play good defense, if you can hold off the opposition, or if you can create assists, that's what you do. It's very straightforward, and that at least he is doing that. But that being said, also one of the other major pieces of news that came out was Anthony Stolarz was actually on the ice for the Toronto Maple Leafs with their optional skate earlier today, but he is not going to be playing in Game 5. And Coach Craig Berube is basically saying he's progressing. He was on the ice a little bit. He's doing better. But right now, after he ended up getting hit in the chin by Sam Reinhart with a shot, and then he ended up getting leveled by Sam Bennett in the second period, Stolarz is basically going to be day to day at this point, and we'll see what happens if he ends up coming back in this round. But good to see at least he is going for practices, and he is taking some time on the ice. So that is a big plus. And then one of the other things, of course, Mike Sullivan is the new head coach of the New York Rangers, and one of the things that JT Miller is mentioning already is that he's looking forward for that direct communication, and he likes that the communication is going to be that style again. And of course, for anyone who's been following hockey, I mean, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they ended up firing Mike Sullivan after they had a brutal season, and then of course the Rangers picked him up right away, and of course Sullivan replaces Peter Laviolette after Sullivan had spent 10 seasons with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that being said, Sullivan has been a two-time Stanley Cup winner, basically in 2016 and 17. He's won 409 games, and he also coached the most games, which was 753 in Penguins history. So he does have a pretty good situation he's going to be walking into, and of course, one of the other things that Miller was saying is a lot of players think very highly of Sullivan. So it should be interesting to see what he does down in the big city, and or the Big Apple for that matter, and then just we'll see over time what's going to actually happen with that club, whether he's going to really turn it around or if there's going to be other issues. But also at the same time, there have been some questionable decisions by Chris Drury, the GM. So it's going to be very interesting to say the least what ends up coming out of that situation. But that being said, it should be pretty interesting. And then really one of the other things that I wanted to mention before we start getting into football, and we actually have some baseball news we're going to talk about tonight too. Essentially, with Carolina, one of the players that we wanted to highlight was Jackson Blake, and he's actually contributed a lot of good things for the Hurricanes so far in the playoff run. And of course, anyone who's been following Jackson Blake, his dad is Jason Blake, who played 871 NHL regular season games and never got out of the first round of the playoffs in six trips. So Jackson is in his first NHL postseason, and he has actually earned a regular spot on the line, and he's actually getting a lot of playing time against the Washington Capitals. So his dad basically said, as it was reported through NHL.com, it's a thrill of a lifetime watching him, and he's very proud of him. And the last time that Jason was actually in the playoffs, Jackson Blake was 7 years old, and that was in the 2011 postseason. And then, of course, Jackson was a toddler when Jason was with the Islanders in the 2004 and 2007 playoffs. So it's good to see him getting a lot of the playing time. And right now, Blake has 5 points in 9 games, which is 2 goals and 3 assists. He had a power play goal in a 4-0 win against Caps in Game 3. And he's moved around from the top line to the fourth line. He's been able to transition with ease. And basically from there, he's just been gaining confidence. And he's been turning into a very nice player. So it's good to see him pay his dues, but it's also good to see him get rewarded for playing well at the same time. So excellent to see that, and really cool that that he's getting all of that attention. I mean, right now, would I love to see Ovi actually get another cup win before he retires? Absolutely. But right now, with how Carolina's playing, I will be very surprised if the Caps actually come back and do anything within this series. I mean, they might win a game or two, but that's pretty much about it. I would think right now, if anything, maybe a four, like a, for example, a 4-1 series or a 4-2 series, but I don't really see anything else happening that'll be to the benefit of them. So that's definitely one thing I wanted to mention. Now, one other story I wanted to mention with the Buffalo Sabres today, and this was actually going around on Twitter, and there were actually a couple of other sites that had mentioned this as well. Actually, our show contributor, Andy, actually ended up sending us this in our group chat that we have offline. But Captain Lou, yes, that Captain Lou Lamoriello, was seen in the Buffalo Niagara International Airport earlier today. And all I know about that is the question: A, why was he here? And B, are the Sabres interested in him? Think about it. You want a senior, I mean, the Sabres have been mentioning they want a senior advisor. And right now, Jason Karamanos is that senior advisor to Kevin Adams, the GM. But if they're looking at having Captain Lou come in and essentially replace Jason Karamanos, or if Karamanos stays in another capacity, all I can say to the Sabres is, why are you looking at that as a possibility? Why are you considering Lou Lamoriello? In all honesty, I don't think it is truly the best fit right now, especially for what this team is trying to do. I just don't see it. Now, there have been some potential questions in terms of whether or not he is actually going to stick around, whether or not he is going to stay with the Islanders, if he's not, what type of advisor he might be. It's unknown right now. But on the Eyes on Isles site, which is one of the sites that's produced by Fansided, basically what ended up happening is that there were a lot of questions whether he would be around in some official capacity after the statement that came out on April 22nd. So, right now, what has happened is that reports last week from The Athletic, and this was actually by Arthur Staple, it stated that there was a possibility that Lamoriello would stay on as an advisor to the GM, and it was updated and amended on Monday. They basically said that there was no plan for Lou to advise the GM, but they may keep him as an advisor to ownership. So the question would be, what has more power? What has more influence? An advisor to the GM or an advisor to ownership? And that's a good question. I wanted to throw it out there. And actually, when we post this on YouTube and Spotify, we'll throw this out there as a question for you guys to take part in the chat. But a lot of people don't know what that means. Does it mean that Lamoriello is not going to do much in the organization in terms of the day-to-day hockey operations? Is he going to be impacting the GM search? Is he going to be looking at possible changes to the head coach, which we know Bobby, when he's been on the show before, and he stated multiple times he absolutely can't stand Patrick Waugh. I mean, what do you do in this specific situation? So there's a lot of different options here. I personally do not think Lou would be the right senior advisor for this team. I really do not think that. And there's a couple of reasons why. First, I look at the body of work with the New York Islanders, and if Bobby were here, he would tell you a little bit more about it. You fire Barry Trotz, you go through two head coaches, and the team is not progressed as much as what a lot of people would have thought. And there is some good talent on the Islanders. Don't get me wrong. There are some good talent there. And basically, to have that situation where they just underperformed, that's just a major concern. And then of course a lot of times now with what they have in the system with their executive, their front office, there are many concerns that there might be a potential underperformance again. But it'll be interesting to say the least what they end up doing, and also of course any of the changes that do come in the offseason. Obviously the NHL draft is coming soon. That is going to be one of the things that we'll actually talk about here in a moment. But when you look at the forwards that they have, like Barzal, Zizekas, Duclair, Engvall, Fashing, which is a former Sabres draft pick, Galcom, Holmstrom, Bo Horvat, Anders Lee, Kyle McLean, Matt Martin, John Gabriel Peugeot, Kyle Palmieri, and Maxim Siflikov. They have a pretty good group of forwards, quite honestly. And then when you look at their defense, they also have a pretty good group as well. And then, of course, goaltending, I mean, Ilya Sorokin and Semyon Varlamov are solid. And then Marcus Hasberg, which not as good as the other two in my opinion, but still, I mean, very serviceable. So overall, pretty decent lineup. But it's like, what do the Islanders have to do in terms of getting their team to perform a little bit further? And that's going to be one of the things that, of course, obviously will have to be looked at. But it is something where, I think Lou has had a couple of issues when it's come to that. Now, that being said, the Islanders won the draft lottery, and we talked about that and last week on the show. And the Islanders did get the draft lottery for the first time since 2009. So, essentially, for anyone who has forgot about what's going to happen in the top 10 picks, the Islanders are obviously picking first. Then you have San Jose picking second, the Blackhawks picking third. Then from there, you're also going to have the Utah Mammoth at fourth, which, yes, they did get their team name last week, and we talked about it on the show. Yeah, the Predators, the Philadelphia Flyers, the Boston Bruins, Seattle. Of course, the Sabres dropped 2 spots down to ninth as a result of the draft. And then Anaheim is going to pick at 10, and then Pittsburgh has picks 11 and 12. So essentially that's what's going to happen there. And the reason that Pittsburgh has a 12th pick, it's basically from a previous trade that they ended up doing with New York Rangers as well as the Vancouver Canucks. So essentially that's where we're at. But I'm interested to see what the Islanders do with this roster. Now, obviously, this coming season, the Buffalo Sabres are going to have to do a lot with this roster, most notably defense and goaltending. And right now, with the way that the AHL playoffs are set up, Devin Levi has been lights out. And that is great to see because he's getting a lot of playing time. He's playing very, very well. And at the same time, Yuri Kulik ended up getting loaned to Rochester, so he's actually getting some playoff time finally as well. And it's good to see him helping out our farm club, so big plus. But Devin Levi, and this is actually in the Buffalo Hockey Beat, and this was actually written by Bill Hoppy. But Devin Levi has recorded a lot of shutouts this season. He's had an insane save percentage, especially during the first round sweep that they ended up having. And it turns out Devin Levi's had 9 shutouts this year, and he's had an AHL best 7 during the regular season. So then you figure, okay, the 7 and 9, I mean, that's two shutout wins in the playoffs. But he also, in the postseason, he has a .978 save percentage. Think about that. .978 save percentage. You're stopping almost 98% of every shot that's coming against you. And that's absolutely insane. And basically for that, I mean, he had 25 wins. He had 2.20 goals against average during the regular season, which also helped his stats quite well. But He's going to be starting in the North Division final against the Laval Rocket, and of course, he just wants to stay in the moment, and he's focusing a lot on the processes, and he tries to keep everything very consistent and very repeatable, and that's huge. So basically, the way he's looking at it, since he's gone down and become the starter in Rochester, one of the things that Mike Leone ended up saying, who's the Amerks coach, is that if Dev gave up 7 goals and we won 9-7, he doesn't care because he wants to win. Unless someone tells him he doesn't know how many shutouts he's had or all the stats. And that's nice. He's not overthinking things. He's really became an elite goaltender in the AHL. And that is going to be one of the things where it's possible that the Sabres may try to bring him up this year, this coming season, and have him in UPL go for the starting role. Now, the problem that happened up here last time when Levi was playing, he did get some wins. He also had some really bad losses. And I think part of it was just due to some growing pains jumping from the Amerks to the big club here in the Sabres. But at the same time, also, the Sabres have had atrocious defenses, and they have not been able to provide support in front of the net. And that's one of the other reasons why Levi's goals against was not that great, and why they looked at having UPL and, of course, James Reimer. So it's good that It's good that Levi has had 39 games over the last 3 seasons with us. It's good that he's had that. But one of the things that he also mentioned, and I think this is a good mindset, is that Levi said the past games are in the past. You got a good save percentage, you got a not so good save percentage. It doesn't change anything going into this present moment, into this game. So it just helps me to stay present, not looking about like past results. You've got one game, it's the game in front of you. And I think that's a really nice mindset that he's actually taken on. So great to see that. And of course, with that being said, uh, this coming off season will be very interesting, especially once we get to the draft, once we know who the Sabres are bringing in, and then of course being able to watch some of the rookie scrimmages that we typically see as we get into the middle of the summer, and then of course the training camp is not going to be that far out, and you have the preseason games and you have the regular season, so that's going to be one of the big things that we'll see. But overall, with Rochester, they won 42 of their 72 regular season games. So right now, Levi thinks that they're starting to hit their best hockey, and that's a big time. They're hitting their stride at the right time. So absolutely great to see. And just to give an idea, in the two games where in the last 2 games that Levi had in the last series, when they played Syracuse, he stopped all 65 shots in the last 2 games, and basically that caused the Crunch to be shut out for a minute for 136 minutes and 31 seconds. So think about that. The rebound control has gotten much better, and that's one thing that Leon has mentioned, and is keeping a lot of second chances to a minimum, and that's huge. And that was a big problem that Levi had when he was up here originally, and I think part of it was just because our defensive pairings have not been great, but his rebound control has improved significantly, and that's one of the big things that needed to happen in order for him to have a full-time spot here on the big club. So great to see Levi getting some time. Great to see him doing a lot of good things, and we'll see what happens as we go into the playoffs. So, and further into the playoffs for that matter. So, with that being said, we're about to go into our second half of the show, and of course, we just want to remind you that if you wanted to take a look at some of our past episodes, go to YouTube, go to Spotify. Our episodes are on there, and of course, feel free to like and subscribe, and of course, leave us some comments. Let us know some of your opinions. So, right now, you know what? Let's go to Major League Baseball because there was some interesting news that came out. Obviously, the Mets are still playing very well, and right now, with the games that are taking place, the Chicago White Sox and Cincinnati, they're tied at 1 at the end of 9. The Angels are actually trailing San Diego 2-1 in the top of the 6th. Middle of the 5th, Seattle is up 1-0 against the Yankees. Top of the 4th, San Fran is up against the Arizona Diamondbacks 4-3. The Dodgers are trailing the Athletics 2-1 in the top of the 4th. And then, of course, earlier today, 2-0 Cleveland beat Milwaukee. And, of course, we also got to see Detroit beat Boston 10-9 in the 11th inning. So very interesting to see how everything went there. And Bobby actually, as part of his trip, got to watch the Blue Jays beat the Mariners at T-Mobile Park. So he'll talk more about that on his Road to 32 episode when that ends up coming up. But it'll be pretty interesting. One of the biggest news items that came out within the past day or so is Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred has now allowed Pete Rose to be eligible for the Hall of Fame. And Shoeless Joe Jackson is also eligible for the Hall of Fame now as well. So let's talk a little bit about that. And for anyone who hasn't followed baseball for any time, Pete Rose, of course, was banned for life from baseball due to a gambling scandal. Same thing ended up happening with Joe Jackson. But this actually also impacts 16 others that were banned for life previously. So Rob Manfred ended up reinstating Eddie Cicotte, Happy Felsch, Chick Gandil, of course, Joe Jackson we talked about, Fred McMullen, Swede Risberg, Buck Weaver, Lefty Williams, Joe Gedeon, Gene Paulette, Benny Koff, Lee McGee, Phil Douglas, Cozy Dolan, Jimmy O'Connell, and William Cox. And of course, obviously, Pete Rose is one of them as well. And you know what the reason that all 16 of these people were reinstated? Simple. They're dead. And Rob Manfred ruled that, well, they're not alive anymore, so we can't ban them for life. So that's essentially how that ended up happening. So let's take a little bit of a step back in terms of how Pete Rose was banned. So Pete Rose voluntarily accepted a permanent place on the ineligible list back on August 24th of 1989. At that time, what happened is that the MLB commissioner, which was A. Bartlett Giamatti, ended up reviewing a lawyer's report documenting Rose's betting on Major League Baseball games, which is a violation of Rule 21, and that's in every single clubhouse. You cannot gamble on games straight up. And this ended up happening back in 1987 when he was a manager of the Cincinnati Reds. So essentially, what happened is that Rose was the first person banned after the tenure of Commissioner Kennesaw Mountain Landis, which was the first commissioner of the Major League Baseball to die while still on the ineligible list, which is pretty interesting. And last December, the current commissioner met with Pete Rose's daughter, Fawn Rose, and the family's attorney, which was Jeffrey Lenkoff, at their request. And they were trying to see if the permanently ineligible list extended beyond death, which apparently, what Rob Manfred ended up saying is that, in his view, once an individual has passed away, the purposes of Rule 21 have been served. So basically, the way Manfred phrases it is that a person that's no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game, and it's hard to conceive a penalty that has more of a deterrent effect than one that lasts a lifetime with no reprieve. So basically, if you die, then the ban is lifted. And that's essentially what ended up happening here. So, of course, Pete Rose was the all-time leader in hits at 4,256, and he spent most of his career with the Reds, and they're actually going to honor him in the ceremony tomorrow night. So, does this mean that Pete Rose is automatically in the Hall of Fame? No. He still has to be voted in. He still has to be voted in. So that's one of the big things that ended up happening. Now, but Selig ended up writing a statement and actually released this earlier as well. He said, quote, I understand and respect Commissioner Rob Manfred's decision regarding the removal of Pete Rose and 16 other deceased individuals from the ineligible list. Given my affection for my friend, the late Bart Giametti, Major League Baseball's seventh commissioner who disciplined Mr. Rose for gambling on his own team all those years ago, I believe Bart would understand and respect the decision as well. So that's also one of the things. Apparently, Selig is in support of it, and essentially what ends up happening now, of course, um, Rose and the other individuals will go through a voting process, and basically what happens from there is anybody's guess. Now, at the time that Pete Rose was banned for life from Major League Baseball, the Hall of Fame did not have a rule barring people on the permanently ineligible list from Hall of Fame consideration. And actually, what happened, Shoeless Jackson was voted on in 1936 and 1946. So it is up to the voting committee if they want to bring him in. And who knows? Maybe Pete Rose will finally end up in Cooperstown. It'll be interesting to see if that is actually the case. But it is definitely one of the big stories that ended up coming out this week. And then, that also being said, Christian Koss, rookie for the San Francisco Giants, man, he hit a real good slam for his first run, home run. So congratulations on that. And then also, Cabrera from the Yankees is going to go to the IL with an ankle fracture. So LeMahieu is going to be activated, and then the Braves actually have finally hit 500. So they're actually playing a little bit better as of late. And then basically from there, of course, Brett Beatty ended up getting go-ahead homer, and he's just been playing lights out for the Mets, just like Juan Soto, just like Alonso, Lindor, and all those guys as of late. So the Mets are continuing to do very well in the overall standings, and essentially right now they lead the NL East at 28-15, and then basically from there, Phillies are right behind, only half a game back right now at this point, but also good to see the Chicago Cubs are leading the NL Central, followed by the St. Louis Cardinals. Dodgers are, of course, leading in the West, and then the Padres are right behind, and the Giants are right behind that. So really, the NL West is a great conference this year, except for Colorado, which is 7-35, and they're just an absolute dumpster fire to watch. I mean, their actual diff in terms of scoring is at -132 right now. So take that for what it's worth. And then of course Pittsburgh, they ended up firing their manager earlier this week. So of course right now they're at 14-29. Not absolutely trash, but not good either, especially in the Central. But other than that, I mean, the Mariners are leading out in the West. In the AL West, actually, they are at 22-18. Detroit Tigers are leading in the Central, 28 wins, 15 losses, and then the Yanks are leading the AL East at 20 with 24 wins, 17 losses, and Boston actually is at 22-22 right now. So they've come back, and Boston's actually playing a little bit better ball right now. But who would have thought that Atlanta would actually be at 500? That's actually one of the interesting things, because I mean, I would have expected them to have a much better start to the season than they did, and they just have not played well for whatever reason it is. They're at 21-21. So who knows? Maybe they can go ahead and they can win a bunch of games going forward, but with them winning the last two right now, they've at least got over the hump. They're at 500, so it'll, to say the least, they do have a legit shot to make a little bit of a run at least. So that's not bad. But that being said, we're gonna jump into football for the last little bit of the show, and one of the big things right now is that, of course, the NFL schedule is going to be released tomorrow. And on our site, we are going to have everything up as soon as it's available. So, of course, we will put the schedule up there. We will share that with all of you. And, of course, when Bob's back next week, we'll talk about some of our reactions and some of our thoughts in terms of what the Bills are going to have. But as of right now, there are some different things that are happening. And one thing that did come out, the Packers will host the Eagles on Monday Night Football in Week 10. So that is going to happen. And that was announced by the NFL. It was announced earlier today. So these two teams will face off again mid-season. And it could actually be a very interesting matchup to watch, especially at that time, because it could definitely have some major implications as each team goes into their journey to return to the postseason. And of course, what's going to happen? The Packers have had two playoff runs in the last two seasons with Jordan Love. Of course, Philly ended up winning the Super Bowl this past year. So very much looking forward to seeing that, and the entire the entire 2025 schedule is going to be released at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, which is tomorrow, on NFL Network, NFL.com, the NFL app, and NFL Plus. So of course we will have that information there. Now, another thing that's come out. There are going to be multiple international games during the 2025 schedule. And one of the games that is going to be happening is in Dublin, Ireland. And this is going to be the first time that's ever happened. Now, 6 of the games will be aired exclusively on NFL Network and NFL Plus. Now, the 2025 Sao Paulo game, the Los Angeles Chargers are going to be in Brazil. But that opponent is revealed tomorrow, so we don't know who that's going to be yet. But one thing that did get announced, though, is that the 2025 Week 1 regular season game in Brazil will be for free on YouTube. So everyone will get to watch it on YouTube and on YouTube TV. That'll be the first time ever that an exclusive YouTube NFL game is going to be streamed live and for free in its entirety on YouTube. So essentially, it's going to be something that everyone will be able to see, as long as you have an internet connection. So that's a big plus. So essentially what will happen with that game, it is going to be played at Corinthians Arena in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and that'll be a Friday night game. So we will find out the opponent as of tomorrow. But that being said, the other international games. The first ever game in Dublin, Ireland will be September 28th. That is going to be at Croke Park, and that'll be with the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So that happens during week 4. Then also, one of the other international games, Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London, is going to be the Minnesota Vikings and the Cleveland Browns. So that'll be on week 5, which is October 5th. So Minnesota gets 2 games this year overseas. Then week 6 will be the Denver Broncos playing the New York Jets in London as well. So that's a couple games Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is going to have. Then in week 7, the LA Rams and the Jacksonville Jaguars will play at Wembley Stadium, which is also in London. So it's the other stadium that's over there. Then week 10, which will be at Olympic Stadium in Berlin, Germany. It'll be the Falcons and the Colts. So what's going to happen, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be the starter, and basically what will happen is then Anthony Richardson will likely be starting that matchup. So it ought to be pretty interesting. And then week 11 is actually in Madrid, Spain, at Santiago Bernabeu Stadium, and that is going to be the Washington Commanders versus the Miami Dolphins. So that'll be the first game ever in Spain as well, and that ought to be pretty interesting because, of course, you have Jaden Daniels coming back from his rookie season where he went far in the playoffs. The Commanders also ended up getting Deebo Samuel. They have Terry McLaurin, of course. Laramie Tunsil is going to be good on protection. And then basically what's going to happen is that with the Miami Dolphins, Tua still has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle for the time being, and if they can actually maintain a line and actually use speed to their advantage, they might be able to do something. But that being said, it'll be very interesting to find out what will truly happen in that case. Now, one other thing that's also going to be interesting to watch as we go forward is that Cincinnati Bengals Trey Hendrickson has basically said straight out he is not going to play for the Bengals in 2025 under his current contract. And this was after he went public with his frustration with the Bengals. And basically, what happened, he talked to reporters earlier today. He said he is not going to play the season on his current contract, and that was the only answer that he had in his 25-minute media session. And this was per the Athletic. Now he is supposed to make $15.8 million in base salary this season, which is the final year of his deal. But also, what ended up happening is that the Cincinnati Bengals coach Zach Taylor had mentioned that if Hendrickson didn't show up for the mandatory minicamp on June 10th or 12th, he would be fined. And basically, Hendrick ended up saying that he alluded to the fact that something won't be done in that time frame. So basically, he's also mad at the Bengals because with the lack of communication post-draft, he's basically saying that it made it very clear that things may not work out. And he felt that it's not necessary. He wanted things to work out. He had mentioned overall, in terms of just overall, he doesn't feel like he's respected by the Bengals. So now, will he show up? Will he not show up? That's the question. And that is going to be one of the things that, of course, we will see as we move forward into the off season. And of course, the Bills had their rookie mini camps, and of course, Mad Max and our draft picks were there. And I will say, Max Harrison definitely is going to be very interesting to watch, especially as we get into the full training camp as that comes up. So, that being said, one of the other things that came out from the Bills today is that they released a uniform patch that is going to be used for the final season of the current Highmark Stadium, and it has, and of course we do have it on our Facebook page, and of course if you want to take a look at it, I know the Buffalo Bills have it on their social media sites as well, but basically it's a shoulder patch. It's a patch that has the final season, and then it has 1973 to 2025. It has a picture of the current Highmark Stadium, and it has a Bills logo. And the way that the Bills made it is appreciate the memories and embrace the future. And it was neat to see. And I will say, I've been to several games in the current stadium. Been to several games there. I enjoy it every time I've gone there. I've been there for snow games. I've been there for rain games, like we did last year when Bob, myself, and some of our buddies from Long Island ended up going with us. And it was it's a great stadium to watch different games, and it's always been fun, whether it's in the good times now, whether it's in the good times we had with Jim Kelly, or whether it's in the rough 14 plus year stretch where we had no playoffs. So it's always interesting to see that. And one of the things also that the Bills had on their media page this week is that Thurman Thomas actually ended up reminiscing on some of the memories in the current stadium as well. So it was cool to see that. But the Bills will be wearing it this year, and with the with the new stadium, actually, a couple of developments ended up coming up earlier in the week, and one of the first things that came up is that the Bills announced a new founding partner of the stadium, which is Verizon. And Verizon's installing an advanced 5G network, which will allow for Wi-Fi in the stadium to be much improved over what is currently there. They're also going to be, and they will actually be, the exclusive wireless telecommunications partner of the new Highmark Stadium, and as a result, they are a founding partner. So essentially, what Pete Gelly, which is the Buffalo Bills EVP and Chief Operating Officer, mentioned that Verizon's technical expertise and leadership in 5G will transform how our fans connect with the game and each other. And there will be cutting edge connectivity to the stadium and in the surrounding campus. So, what they're going to be doing is Verizon's going to install, and this may sound a little technical, they're going to install and own the neutral host distributed antenna system in the new stadium and provide state-of-the-art technology and wireless solutions to keep fans connected. And of course, they're going to install Verizon Business Solutions and services in the new stadium to help with sustainability, power operations, and they say to streamline fan experiences. So they're also providing temporary Wi-Fi access points on the site to power design, integration, logistics, and installation within the facility. So essentially, one of the big things that they mentioned, even with the stadium seating approximately 60,000 with fixed seats and expandable capacity to hold special events, what's going to happen is that they're designing the system to have much more capacity than what is going to be with just the fixed seats. So that's a big plus. And one of the other things that's actually happened is with the stadium, they've also started to install the brand new seats, which one of the season ticket holders was drawn, and they actually got to be part of the installation of the first 6 seats in the stadium. So that was also done this past week. And then within the stadium, besides the new 5G system being installed, the first speakers have already been installed and in position. So we're down to less than 12 months from when the new stadium opens. And if you've been by there recently, some of the exterior is already in. You see some of the glass walls that have already been put up. So it's going to be here before you know it. It really will be here before we know it. And then this, I will say, to see the old stadium, the current stadium shut down, I will say, it reminds me of the Odd. Lots of memories in there. That was tough to see that building go. And it'll be tough to see this building go as well. But it's nice that we still have a team. It's nice that the team is still going to be here. We're going to have a brand new home for them. It's going to be state of the art. It's going to be, I think, a great experience for fans to come here. And especially now with talk of having at least a hotel or two being built right by the new stadium and having new development come in, it's going to be very nice to see some big changes out in Orchard Park. And if you're out there, I mean, you're driving down Route 20. I mean, that stadium is easily twice the height of the current stadium. I mean, that is massive. And then right by Big Tree Road, you see the massive dirt piles and everything from the excavation that took place. So it's definitely coming along very quickly, and it's going to be neat to see what the final product is, especially as we get to that stage. So that being said, more to come. Obviously, we'll talk more about the new stadium as it gets closer, and we'll absolutely go from there. But in the meantime, with season tickets, of course, I mean there is still availability, so that is there. There are, of course, I mean the PSLs is a big point of contention, which a lot of people have had, but otherwise, it'll be neat to see what actually happens in the new stadium and what they're going to do, and of course, actually, not too long from now, the actual natural grass field's going to grow in as well. So that'll be a big plus at the same time. That being said, we're going to wrap up here in just a moment. But we did want to say, of course, when Bob comes back next week, we'll talk a little bit about the trip that he's been on because him and his wife are away for their anniversary. So, of course, we wish them well. They're out in the middle of the ocean somewhere, so we'll hear from him. But one of the things he did mention, though, is that I'm pretty sure he is going to talk about the baseball game he went to in Seattle. He'll talk a little bit about some of his experience because he went back there and it's the second time in the last 6 months. So he'll talk a little bit about that, and he did try some creative stuff in the stadium. He actually ended up trying, I think, like either a Seattle dog or a Mariners dog. He ended up doing something like that again, where there was something crazy. But he actually, from what I saw in the pictures, he actually had some bleacher seats, I believe. So it'd be interesting to see what he ended up seeing out in the outfield and what he got to do, and then just hear a little bit about his time. So that'll be very interesting. But of course, as we get to the actual schedule release, once the NFL does make that available, we will make sure that everybody knows about it. And I might even go live and just talk a little bit about the Bills schedule itself. And, we'll just do a little bit of a quick show, maybe talking about some of the opponents that we'll be facing. And then of course, as we get further along, we typically like to start planning our game trip that we do. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and then we'll go from there. So, what I'll say, did a lot of talking. I think it's a little bit of a shorter episode this week, but that's okay. We didn't have a whole ton of sports news really going on other than what we've covered. So, that being said, of course, as always, we appreciate you watching. Thanks for taking the time to be with us. Of course, if you haven't done so on YouTube or Spotify, like and subscribe, be part of it. Of course, Spotify is great if you want to download our episodes anytime you're on the go. And then until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you next week.